Me, more tan the better.
I'm jealous. I haven't seen the sun in like 4 years.
Yeah, but Da Silva, Portuguese.
Yes, and Spanish.
Okay, so you naturally have a more tan skin.
Yeah, but my grandmother's more tan than I am right now, so.
What is... So both... Well, your dad being Da Silva is obviously...
Spanish. Yeah.
And then your
Mom is Portuguese.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is both Mediterranean skin.
Yeah, I've got a mix, and yet I'm failing my family terribly.
No, but you're not pale.
I answer.
Well, you're, the
At least
parts
like
that I
this
can
part.
see, yeah. The
No.
parts that maybe see the sun.
No, this is why we wear leggings.
That's true. Welcome, Dani. Dani Da Silva, thank you so much for coming through. I really appreciate it.
It's an absolute privilege to be here. Thank you, JC, for inviting me.
Of course. So you are a very interesting lady. I've got some notes here because I'll say it wrong.
Okay.
Powerlifter, I can say that. That's pretty easy to remember. But you're a PhD candidate and a biomedical scientist. So
Yes.
PhD candidate, you've got your BSc degree.
Yes.
So what BSc degree is that?
So I have a BSc in biomedical technology, and now I've done already a master's in biomedical science, and now I'm busy doing my PhD.
Okay, and your PhD in...
So broad spectrum.
I'm just going to lower this down a
for
bit.
it.
There you go.
So broad spectrum is biomedical science, but my focus lies in stem cell regenerative therapy, and I use something very cool called photobiomodulation, which in basic terms is called laser therapy. So I test out how laser therapy can actually affect stem cells and hopefully enhance them, and use that as a regenerative tool for disease.
Laser therapy, is it a similar concept with light?
Yes.
Okay. So like your laser hair removals, all
Yeah,
of those?
pretty much. So we use different wavelengths and things like that, and we see which one is actually better for the cells and how it helps work in their pathways.
Because, yeah, I mean, essentially, you know, radio frequency, regenerating the skin,
Yes.
you know, for microneedling and for all of those, you know, similar things. How is it different in terms of like comparing it to aesthetic medicine?
So right now, I think the biggest struggle is that we don't really know how it actually helps these cells. So we have a basic understanding of more or less the mechanism that these, like a light affects the cell. For example, I work with two very specific wavelengths. I work with an 825 nanometer wavelength and a 525 nanometer wavelength. And basically, the one wavelength from what we've seen actually helps these cells proliferate or become more abundant. And the other wavelength actually helps the cells change into a different cell type, for example. So,
Did you say 1550 or
525?
525?
Yeah, so that's
okay.
green light. If
Okay.
you're looking at it from a light spectrum.
Yeah.
The 825 is a near infrared light. So those are my two main focuses.
And what application is there, you know, in terms of helping people, or like what would it help with?
So right now my study is very specific. So my treatment is actually for osteoporosis. So I take adipose-derived stem cells or fat stem cells derived from there, and I actually try change those cells to become into early bone cells. Because the biggest problem with osteoporosis is that those cells actually stop forming osteogenic type cells, and they actually turn into fat cells. That's what makes the bone so brittle. So this is basically how can we reverse that from actually happening, and that's what my study's been about.
Sure, we're going to get into that, but I want to first talk about ways to prevent osteoporosis as well, which is weightlifting.
Yes.
Powerlifting.
Yes.
What got you into powerlifting specifically?
To be honest, I love testing my strength. So I did initially start with bodybuilding. A lot of people actually know that as my background. And then I decided to go to Barbell Bullies, which is the current gym that I'm at now. And my coach saw so much potential in me, and he was like, "You're a powerlifter." And I was just very obscured by the term. I mean, I used to chase aesthetics, and now I'm chasing strength and not worrying about a scale, to be very specific. And I love it. I absolutely adore testing what my body is capable of doing.
How long now have you been powerlifting and, you know, changed from bodybuilding?
So 3 years this year.
Okay.
So still very new in the sport, still have a lot of room to grow. And hopefully I can be on a world championship
But
level.
you've set the deadlift record for your under 63 kilograms.
Yes. So
and what
I
was that weight that you...
currently 180 kilos. So I broke mine from last year already, 170. So it's pretty awesome to see that lift sort of growing and getting better, and also pushing the South African standard. I mean, seeing what world champs are doing in an under 63 open
What
category.
are they doing?
If I'm not mistaken, the current deadlift record is 230.5 kilos. So it's a very big difference between our South African standard versus the world standard.
And is that what you, obviously, I mean, even when they do at that level, want to be the best. Is that what you want to work towards?
Definitely.
Is that a goal of yours?
Definitely. That is definitely the goal. I do want to be top 10 in the world. So that is my main focus right now for the next 2 years. And I want to push South African powerlifting to be at that level. I feel like we have the ability to be there. Definitely, there's so much South African talent here. I mean, I just look at my teammates and even other lifters around the country, and it's insane what we're already pulling through. So there's definitely no doubt in my head that we can't be on that same standard.
What's the timeline as a power lifter to be able to improve your deadlift by 40 kilograms?
To be honest, it depends on how hard you work. So I don't push deadlifts in terms of like how people would think, like training it twice a week or anything. I literally train deadlifts once a week. But it's a matter of how you do it, what accessories you do to help enhance that exercise. Deadlifts take a lot out of your CNS system. So to sit there and push on deadlifts 2-3 times a week would actually be setting you backwards.
So what accessory exercises would be beneficial for people that even just want to improve their lift for deadlift?
Of course. So it really depends on where your weakness is. So if you have a problem driving off the ground, then doing things like a pause deadlift or band deadlifts, even helping with your lockout band deadlifts are amazing to sort of push into your workouts. I love doing box deadlifts as well. So anything just below where the bar sits below the knee, I find like that also strengthens your lockout a lot. A lot of people don't tend to have a problem driving the bar off the ground. It's that sticking point of where it gets to your knee or it gets to your mid-thigh that they just can't pull through with the lift. So definitely doing a box deadlift or your banded deadlifts, that really, really helps strengthen, especially that lower back of yours. And it in turn actually even helps with squats. So doing those little exercises, they all sort of fall in place and assisting with all the lifts.
That initial transition for you, how was that, going from something that's purely aesthetic based and now strength based, where you actually categorically must not try and look and focus on aesthetics, because then your strength is going to suffer?
I will be honest, it was very difficult in the beginning. Especially everybody says, bodybuilders have this body dysmorphia. That was certainly a thing at the time. I mean, for 6 months, I constantly weighed myself. I constantly wanted to stay at a certain weight category. And then I realized food is my friend, especially when it comes to lifting. You need to eat carbs. You need to fuel up. You need to eat to lift heavy. And as soon as I started accepting that as part of what I need to do, then my weight started just increasing in terms of the numbers on the bar. And that became my main focus. That's all I cared about. I was like, okay, what's the next goal that I need to get on squat or bench or deadlift? And when you start focusing on that instead of the scale, it sort of helps you deal with the transition a bit better, if I can phrase it like that. It's not easy as well. And look, I've seen a lot of powerlifters that are aesthetically pleasing. I mean...
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean you're not aesthetically pleasing because you're strong. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
We don't turn into the Michelin Man. But it's definitely not our primary focus. Our food becomes our fuel for our lifting.
Do you know any vegan powerlifters that are performing numbers and doing really well?
To be honest, there is one that I know of personally. She is from... to remember her country. I know she competes in the under 63s. I know her Instagram handle.
Okay.
I'm so terrible with names nowadays.
Right.
You know people by Instagram.
Yeah.
Saifi, if I'm phrasing it correctly.
Okay.
Belgium, there we go.
Okay.
Belgian powerlifter. She actually sits within the top 10 in the world. So she is super strong.
Your weight class as well.
Under 63 opens, yes. So she's incredibly strong and she is a vegan lifter. She'll even show what she eats before in terms of when she's about to go compete at a meet and that kind of thing. And I find it actually kind of inspirational. I know a lot of people have a defense against vegans that are in sports. To be honest, I don't think it limits you. I know a vegan diet is very difficult, and especially to get in that protein or get in that fuel is a challenge. But if you have the means and the capabilities of actually doing it, don't think it's a limiting factor.
Yeah, I think with vegan diets, you easily can get in enough carbs. And obviously that's obviously protein's important for recovery, but for that strength, that raw power, the carbs are what's most
Definitely.
probably fundamental. And then now in terms of, because there's a lot of people that will say, like, especially when you're competing, you cut down your carbs.
Mm.
How have you, managed that? And how was that initial transition where like, competing carbs is the enemy? In trying to stay lean, people assume that carbs is the enemy. How was that for you? Did you go through like a transition phase where you tried to be as strong while limiting the carbs, and then you got to a point where you're like, actually, I just need to be eating carbs. I can't think of carbs as a bad thing.
Yeah. Look, I'm Portuguese. Carbs
Okay.
is life.
Yeah.
So I grew up in that household. To be honest, I only really felt where I had to start following a diet and a meal plan this year, funny enough. The last 2 years for powerlifting, I've managed to stay underneath in my weight category. Whereas this year I noticed my body just decided to sit 2 kilos above my competing weight category. And it's not a challenge. It's not always the biggest, stress. But in terms of that prep just before comp, those last like 6 or 8 weeks, you do have to become a bit more stringent on your carbs and cutting that down. It does make you feel weak, I won't lie. But after you do your weigh-in and how you refeed, I feel makes the biggest impact on then how you'll perform on the day.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of utilizing your carbs and knowing how your body responds to it and what carbs are actually very good for your body that you can then enhance it for your performance. I don't think carbs are something that we should be afraid of. I think it's just knowing when to use it and for what.
Yeah. And what is the next class up? Because obviously you're under 63. What's
Yes.
the next weight class?
Under 69.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd have to put on quite a bit of weight to make that.
Look, the previous world champ from under 63s, she sits at about a 65, 66 kilos now, and she's competing in the under 69s, and she's actually dominating the under 69s. So as much as being heavier sometimes works in your favor, actually having a lighter body weight sometimes also works in your favor if you can still maintain that kind of strength. So for us with powerlifting, a lot of the times we'll have like the same total on the day, and then they look at body weight. And whoever's the lightest body weight will then place accordingly. You'll place first, and then the next person second.
Okay.
So body weight does then turn into your favor. So it's kind of a catch-22 that you try be your lightest but your strongest at the same time.
Yeah.
Or you've just got to be super strong.
You want to basically weigh in at like 62.9
Yes.
and
then still be
really
able
strong.
to break whoever's total might be similar to yours, even if they're sitting at a 62.05 or something
Yeah.
like that. So there's always that catch. You don't know if someone's going to weigh in lighter than you and still be stronger than you or as strong as you. So you've always just got to be a little bit careful of that. For an under 63, optimally, we do want to weigh in at around 62.5, just because during prep, we are sitting at a bit of a higher weight category. Majority of us sit at about 65, 66 kilos. So normally 3 kilos above our competing weight. And that's just so that we can build muscle and, carry that through so we can get the strength that we need when we do need to go into prep and go into a comp. Also, hopefully that doesn't, how you drop also doesn't affect your strength too much.
Yeah, I guess, it's the same as like boxing where they need to make weight. Competing, obviously not, because you don't really need to be strong. You just need to be able to not pass out on stage.
Yes, definitely.
But with boxing, with anything where you need to make weight, where there's physicality involved, post, weight, weigh-in, you do need that strength.
Definitely.
And how popular is powerlifting in South Africa amongst women?
To be honest, it's grown a lot from the last 3 years that I've been competing. I've watched the sport grow and I'm absolutely amazed by it. I think it's also because of the whole social media thing in terms of women are encouraging strength more nowadays. And I think that's a brilliant thing. And especially South Africa needs the sport to grow. We need more female powerlifters. Men, it's easier to transition for men to get into powerlifting. But women are scared of like getting underneath a bar that's double their weight or, so I really think that social media has helped a lot in terms of growing the sport itself. But definitely it's grown tremendously. It's incredible to watch so many strong women actually lifting now.
Is that, do you think, the biggest limitation in terms of getting women to, just come to a training session is maybe that fear of, squatting a heavy weight? Or what do you think? Is it uneducation? Like they're not educated on what the benefits are?
I think it's A multiple range of factors. I think a lot of women still think that strength training builds too much muscle, that they don't want to look a certain way. I think it's also a matter of they don't have the knowledge in terms of correct form and correct technique to lift or carry a certain weight, which is all things you learn. So, I mean, even going into a gym and learning how to do a basic accessory exercise, or you have to learn how to do that kind of thing. And then the same thing works with squats and with bench and with deadlift. A lot of the lifts are very technical, but those technicalities you end up developing and learning how to do it. And I feel like just it has to start with asking someone to assist you. And I think we really have to try and break the idea that lifting a certain weight or whatever is going to put on a certain muscle or a certain physique, and you're going to look like a man.
If only it was actually that easy to build muscle.
Definitely. I certainly wish it was.
Yeah.
I would be Hulk by now if, my weight correlated to that.
Yeah.
So,
and your Instagram name.
Definitely. That actually came from a joke. But it's definitely stuck quite easily with a lot of people.
What was the joke?
So when I used to start with bodybuilding and things like that, the guys in the gym used to always just make fun of me when I was building muscle, and they're like, "You're turning into little Hulk." And then it just sort of stuck there, and I was like, you know what, that sounds like a pretty cool Instagram name.
I mean, also for someone that's trying to build muscle, that's a compliment.
Exactly. I used to take it as much of a compliment. I wasn't one of those girls that was afraid of muscle. I was inspired by Dana Lynn Bailey when I was during my bodybuilding days. So I love the idea of seeing a masculine woman, but then that's my preference, and I don't expect every woman to want to look the same or to be the same. Just the uneducation in terms of, if you lift a certain weight, then you're all going to look like that. And I feel like it's just really a concept that we have to try and break, and it's very difficult. I think women are scared of it, but I feel like if we keep educating or keep encouraging women that, you can lift this weight, you're not going to turn into Hulk or look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's okay, but you'll still be strong, and there's nothing wrong with being a strong woman.
With strength training and eating a bit more than what you would have when you were competing, and having a different style of training, for you personally, have you seen it far easier to build muscle, but maybe your training frequency is less, or the rest periods are longer? So for you and your physique, how have you seen the muscle development from competing to powerlifting?
To be honest, I've seen my legs grow a lot better. Squats and deadlifts are definitely the secret to getting bigger legs. And obviously doing accessories, yes, but having a big squat definitely improves that leg growth, which is something I used to battle a lot with bodybuilding. I naturally have genetically, I can phrase it like that. I can build like a big back and big shoulders, and my body allows for me to do that. But my lower body's always been a bit stubborn. So when I got into powerlifting, and I think the eating more definitely made a difference, and obviously the style of training, it helped grow my legs a lot, which is a secret now as well for a big deadlift and a big squat. So I definitely think the style of training has some benefit to still growing muscle. I mean, it's particularly with guys. You hear them complain a lot about they're out of proportion or their legs aren't growing enough, and ask them how many times a week do they squat, for example. And I'm not attacking or anything. It's a matter of, you want bigger legs or you want, bigger quads and things like that. You have to put in the work. Get a bigger squat. Learn how to do a better squat. Squat deep. Not 45-degree type squats. And I feel like guys don't have a tendency of listening to a girl. They just don't, from what I've seen. So they don't do it until I've noticed one of my guy friends will then be like, no, powerlifting, by having a big squat, I've gotten bigger legs, or so that kind of thing. So I think, yeah.
But there's a funny thing about men, is men's egos are so high and so, out of proportion to what they actually deserve to have as an ego. And then a girl, a lady will come along, someone that isn't usually able to build as much muscle or naturally as strong. And then they definitely, most men, maybe not most, but some won't listen to it, to the girl, because they're like, who's this girl telling me how to squat or how to lift or how to, and it's society as a whole mostly is men just not being open to listen to women.
Definitely.
And how is that, has there been a psychological aspect for you to being stronger? If I look at competing, when I used to compete, the psychological aspect of, okay, I am building something that people automatically, because of how I look, appreciate me more or respect me more, or which in turn, actually, you don't really deserve respect just because you're able to diet or your physique looks really good. It doesn't mean that you actually are deserving of respect. But the moment someone has a great body, they immediately just get a bit more respect or get more time of day from people. So what for you do you think is the reason why you've far more enjoyed the strength aspect compared to like the competing aspect?
I think it's a matter of, as a woman, you grow up your entire life, you know, relying on a male to open a jar, for example, or to assist with something physical. And I never really grew up in that house. My dad very much made me independent. I was sort of the boy and the girl of the house. So my dad would be like, no, you can open this jar yourself, or, you know, you use a certain technique, or you can, I used to help him carry car parts because my dad used to, you know, fix stuff in the back garden. And I think because of my upbringing, I was like, I want to be stronger. I want to be capable of doing things myself. And I think it was more just an independence thing. I hated when guys used to tell me, no, I can't lift a certain weight, or, you know, you can't sort of carry that, or something so remedial. But if I'm carrying a box, for example, to my car, automatically there's one or two guys who will be like, oh, can we help you? Because they assume that you're not capable of doing that. And I understand that they're being, you know, like a gentleman and they're being nice and they're trying to assist. But it's the assumption of assuming that I am incapable of carrying it that upsets me, because it's not something automatic that a woman shouldn't be able to carry a box. Yes, you can carry it for her because you want to be a nice human being, but don't assume she's unable to actually do it herself. So I think what I loved about powerlifting and what I still love about it is that I'm proving to myself every day that I am strong enough to do something that I didn't think I was capable of doing. And I feel like that just falls into life in general. Automatically, you assume that you're not capable of doing something, or you're not smart enough for something. And I feel like the sport helps enhance my mental stability in that regard, in the sense of, you know, if you can do this, you're more than capable of doing something else. And it's just forcing that mental fortitude again. And I think that's just what I fell in love with the sport for.
Improving those lifts, you know, how do you, like, if you're squatting 180 and you say, I want to get to 190, like, okay, obviously it's all relative. Okay, so what's your max squat?
Currently 160.
160, which is a lot. Most of the guys watching this probably can't do that. So if you want to get to 170, what's the actual timeline that's realistic for you to be like, or even like, you know, is it I'm able to squat 2 kilograms heavier every month, or like if I'm primarily working on that, like what's the timeline in terms of gaining strength as a professional powerlifter would?
Of course. So from what I've seen in my training itself, I've noticed that I can go up about 10 kilos a year on a squat and a deadlift. Deadlift sometimes 15, even 20. Bench, unfortunately, females do struggle with this. I am one of them. I've gone up in bench by like 2.5 kilos a year, which is still progress. So I will take what I can get. But it is a process, and it's not going to come instantly. And yes, if you can build 10 kilos in a year, that's incredible. But if you build 5, that's just as incredible. As long as you're not in the same place or lifting the same weights that you were last year, then I feel like the progress is there. You've just got to keep working, or maybe it's a technique change that you need to find, or, you know, maybe you didn't train twice a week on a certain like squat or bench, and that hindered your progress a little bit. So there's a lot of factors. There's also stress. There's so many things that can influence getting your totals up. But one thing my coach always says to me is that consistency is key. So the fact that you come in every day in the gym, regardless of how your rest was, regardless of how your stress was, and you're there and you're training and you're trying to get those numbers up, that's all that counts.
And I think it's also initial lifters or first time newbie lifters, their numbers would jump quickly.
Yes.
But, you know, once you've been actively trying to get stronger for over a year, obviously the numbers it starts to get slower and slower.
Yes.
Have you seen a correlation between how much stronger you've got and your weight?
So to be honest, yes. I've noticed that as soon as I started peaking up around, because when I started powerlifting, I was sitting at around 56, 57 kilos. As soon as my numbers started going up and I was sitting at around 61, 62, that's really when I reached my peak in powerlifting, my numbers started to grow a lot better. So there is a correlation between your current body weight and obviously the numbers you lift. But I'm always a little cautious of thinking like that or telling other people that, because they automatically assume, okay, then I'll go up a weight class and I'll be stronger then. And it's like, yes, you will. But however, you are competing against girls that have been in that weight class for a lot longer and have been able to build in that sort of, weight.
Yeah.
So then they will automatically still be stronger than you. It's not necessarily as soon as you start picking up weight now, you can lift 20 kilos heavier. Wish it did work like that. But it's once again, it's now helping your body get used to that weight that you're now carrying yourself, and you've got to now position yourself differently or carry the bar differently, and getting that technique right again now with a different weight on you, and how to use that in your favor. So it's not automatically once your body weight increases, then weight will always increase. And unfortunately for newbies, something that I wish I knew, you do reach a plateau. So you do climb really, really quick, and then you will reach a plateau, and it feels frustrating in the beginning. It's annoying when you're 6 months in and you're still lifting the same weights, or you're lucky you're still lifting the same weights. And it happens in powerlifting. It's your body is now, either you'll start lifting it faster, or you'll start like carrying the weight better, or now you can do 2 reps on it instead of 1. So those are the wins that you then have to start focusing on. So even if the weight on the bar isn't increasing, the fact that you can maybe do it better than how you did it the first time, or doing more reps on it, I feel like that's those little goals that you need to start focusing on in powerlifting. It's not always about the weight on the bar. And I think that's also why people get so discouraged from powerlifting a little quickly. They'll do it in a year, and then after that, they'll be like, oh, my numbers aren't increasing. And I get it. It's very annoying because the whole goal around the sport is technically to have the biggest weight on the bar. But at the same time, your body also needs room for adjusting to it. So it's letting your body accept the weight and accepting the little wins that you can take from that session. It's not always going to be the biggest weight on the bar.
I think, the moment you hit that plateau, how do you get past that? Is it just the consistency of just keep going,
Definitely
and then you break the peak?
Eventually push through it. But it will take you 6 months, 8 months. It's not going to be instant. And I think that is where your discipline has to be stronger than your ego, for example. It's very easy for powerlifters to get ego lifting. And it's understandably, it comes with the sport. But at the same time, you just have to accept that it's not always going to be a big number that I can lift today. I mean, there's even sessions where I lift close to 30 kilos below a weight I know I've pulled before, and it feels hard. It feels like I'm lifting that weight again. And it's just, maybe I didn't rest enough. Maybe I'm a little stressed out. Maybe, something's a little tight and it's just not giving out today. So you just have to accept the session for what it is. You put in the work and staying consistent, and the weight will come.
Have you encouraged any of your family members to join you in your weightlifting endeavors?
So my family are not sport people whatsoever. My mom, unfortunately, doesn't really understand why I'd want to put, double my body weight on my back. And I get where she's coming from. She's a little old school, but she's very accepting of me participating in a sport because I love it. And my dad as well. My dad's actually the reason that I got into bodybuilding in the first place. So when I got into bodybuilding and then moved into powerlifting, he was very supportive of it. I think he likes that I'm quite strong and I'm, I love lifting weights and doing something unusual. And as long as it makes me happy, I think they're quite happy with it.
And it's a healthy thing to be interested in.
Definitely.
So it's not like they're upset because their daughter's into...
Who knows what else? Every
exactly.
parent's nightmare.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think they just let me do what I need to do. As long as, I'm still studying and I'm still doing the work I need to and I get that done, then they don't really mind if this is what I do as a hobby.
People often think that powerlifting can, spur more injuries, encourage injuries. I was actually in research and preparation for this. I was reading a study, I think it was the London Sports Institute or whatever. They put out did a study with like 460 powerlifters, and the end result was that powerlifting powerlifting in terms of injuries is the same amount as any other non-contact sport, whereas contact sports were always higher.
Yes.
So, people might think, no, you lifting this amount of weight is going to be so bad for you. But if your form's correct, you're at less risk than someone that's playing rugby.
Exactly. No, definitely.
How have you, have you suffered injuries? Because I mean, I know I try perform whatever with correct form, but I still get an injury or I still injure my shoulder. Like, it's not like because your form's perfect, you're not going to suffer injuries.
Of course, no, look, you're not inevitable to injuries. And I know a lot of powerlifters that have had injuries and they've come back from them. I myself have a bit of a hip issue and a shoulder issue. And I know when it starts to give me signs and indications, and I know, okay, I need to either do a deload and then go to a chiropractor and like release it now. And so I do know the preventative sort of treatments that I need to undergo for not getting an injury. But to be very honest, getting an injury in this sport, very limited. And the reason I say that is because you do it under such controlled conditions. You warm up properly. You then get to a top single. You've always, well, for example, I always have my coach around me. So whenever I do a powerlifting session, I always have my coach, or I'll have other teammates of mine that know the sport, that know how to do things around me, watching me, spotting me. And I feel like because you've got all those control factors in place, you sort of limit your risk to getting an injury. And obviously your body's not always going to be 100% every day. So I think it's a matter of knowing, can I carry this today or can I not do it? If you're starting to feel, for example, I'll know when my hip's not happy, when I feel it being a little bit like pulling or things like that on a warm-up weight. So if I feel that on a warm-up weight, I know, okay, my top single is not going to be what it should have been. It might be 10, 15 kilos lighter, and I might limit my working sets, and I'll take it from there and I'll do a deload next week because I know my hips are already starting to act out. So I think it's a matter of just listening to your body, also knowing when to push. Like if you're feeling good on the day and you can feel nothing's niggling and nothing's feeling tight, then go for it. But under the correct conditions, under the correct guidance. I definitely think sports like this shouldn't be done without a proper coach and influence, just because it is risky. You are putting 2-3 times your body weight on your back, or even benching is a risk, or deadlifting, you can pull something very badly. So it's a matter of, if you have the correct guidance that's showing you, okay, this day, for example, you've changed something, you're doing something weird with your technique, focus on this, correct it on the next rep. So to have that constant guidance, I feel like is essential in order to prevent injuries as well.
I mean, I think everyone's seen those videos of guys like benching and then they tear their pec and then instantly it just goes blue. Have you seen like at competitions any injuries like that?
I've seen it once during deadlifts, funny enough. The tendon in their bicep ended up pulling, but that was already on the second attempt. You could see wasn't gripping the bar the right way, and then came to third attempt, the tendon just ripped. So I have seen that once. Terrifying to see. Literally just watch it, like screen draw back up there. But I feel I actually haven't really seen that many injuries, and you would expect it more on a comp day, especially because, you know, you've been prepping and your body's a little bit strained, and, you know, you're pushing out big weights, so you're really trying to like go for a win or anything like that. And I haven't really seen anything quite intense, if I can phrase it that way.
Do you have, you know, because obviously we see it in the Olympics or the powerlifting, is that ever something you'd look into going towards?
So unfortunately, powerlifting currently is an Olympic sport.
So then what's the weightlifting that they do in Olympics? Because
so Olympics, they do weightlifting. So they'll do more your snatch and jerks and those kind of things.
Do they not just do like pure deadlifts, bench?
Not that, no. So as far as I know, powerlifting unfortunately isn't in the Olympics.
Why do you think it's not?
So from what I understand is that we're also very inconsistent with our weight classes. I mean, we've changed weight classes, I think almost every 2-3 years. And those inconsistencies sort of then, you know, cause speculation in the sport itself. So it's almost like we're still finding our parameters with the sport. Also, unfortunately, the excuse of doping.
But I mean, that happens in every single sport.
That's in every sport. So even in Olympic sports that we know of, I mean, with weightlifters, they were weightlifters. You can't tell me that
those people aren't.
Exactly.
Like the best basketball players, the best soccer players, everybody.
Yeah. And look, we really hope that they aren't doing it, but realistically speaking, there are athletes that would do it. So I feel like to use that as an excuse as to why powerlifting shouldn't be an Olympic sport is a bit a weak excuse. If I can phrase it that way. But even now, I mean, we've got world championships, we have a Commonwealth, so we've got a lot of competitions, big competitions that we can still go and place in. I mean, even Sheffield is bigger than the World Championship for powerlifting, and it's insane what they can actually do there. And these are all athletes that are tested. They're all follow IPF, so there's no doping in our sport. Well, from that federation, if I can phrase it that way. And just seeing what they're doing on a platform is insane. So I don't see why it shouldn't be recognized as an Olympic sport. But hopefully one day.
Yeah, hopefully one day. For you, who do you idolize? Like, obviously, because you mentioned Dana when you're competing, you know, who do you look up to now? Is she in your same weight category or?
So when I started the sport, I definitely idolized Leah Bevol. She's actually now the one that's moved up a weight class to under 69s. There was just something about her, not just for her being, you know, the world champ in my weight class, but as an athlete that I resonated with her. I mean, she's had quite an intense like hip injury, and she's completely changed her squats and her deadlift and all of those sort of things. But seeing how she overcome those challenges as an athlete was just so impressive. And there's so many remarkable female powerlifters. I mean, you've got Jessica Butner, you've got Carolina from New Zealand, and just watching these women do what they do and be in the sport for as long as they have as well. I mean, it's incredible. It also shows you that powerlifting isn't just a sport that you can only peak at a certain age. It's one that you can carry through, and if anything, you actually get stronger the longer you do it.
That's what I've also heard, is that the older you get, the stronger you actually do get. Obviously, if you consistently train.
Definitely. So I think that's another beautiful feature about powerlifting, is that you can do this until you're 70 if you still want to lift the bar. So there's no limiting age factor to the sports, and I think that also makes it so inclusive that so many people can participate in it if they want to. I mean, we even have a sub-junior category and a junior category, and watching recently the World Championships for the sub-juniors and juniors, and watching these...
What is sub-junior?
So already from 14, if I'm not mistaken, you can start competing on a World Championship sort of platform. And you're watching 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds breaking world records. I mean, recently now at Worlds, the sub-junior, if I'm not mistaken, under 63, 184.5 kilo squats. It was insane.
Sure.
And it's incredible to see the younger generation already coming through, and now whatever they're going to be able to compete in and bring to the next level for the sport is also just incredible. And I'm seeing it already in South Africa. I'm seeing young athletes and what they're lifting, and it's insane. I mean, I have the privilege of competing with my coach's daughter, who's in the same weight class as me. She can also compete in the opens, and we come basically head to head on weight. We lift pretty much the same squats, the same bench, the same deadlift. But seeing a 16-year-old girl doing that is just remarkable.
Oh, sorry, that was just the aircon. And now with men transitioning to be a woman and then competing against women, like, what are your thoughts on that? What are the murmurs within the industry? Like, is it fair? Is it not fair? You know, personally, and then maybe what you've heard being discussed.
So as far as I know, with regards to powerlifting, nothing has been mentioned about bringing it in.
Because weightlifting, I think at the Olympics there was a chick.
There was, yeah. So there was a man.
A man who was competing with the woman, yeah.
Yes. Funny about that, still failed and didn't actually end up placing, regardless of competing with women. And I feel like, you know what, sometimes, yes, there are people that do want to transition from being a man into a woman. I completely understand. But I do personally, I feel like maybe then it should be a separate competing sort of category, just because even if you are a woman now, you've had years and years and years of built testosterone in you, much higher than a woman. You've built muscle a lot stronger than a woman. The density of muscle on men compared to women, I mean, that's just a fact. We've accepted it. I completely agree that men are stronger than women. But to now have them come into a female class of where women are competing with each other, it's not fair. It is a disadvantage. You had all of those. It's the same as if a woman had to now start taking tests. If a woman has to be disqualified for that, then I don't see why a man who's had years of that is allowed to compete with a woman. And honestly, I don't have an issue with the concept. I have an issue with the fairness. And I think in a sport that is so strength-based, I mean, that's all it's about, really. To now have a man now come and do that kind of thing is already at a disadvantage. And I've heard a lot of women that said that they won't even bother competing if that's the case, because we already know like who's going to come out stronger. It's just there. So it's not a matter of, you know, is it wrong or anything. It's just a matter of like it won't be fair anymore in terms of a competition.
And it's difficult because people say everyone should be treated equally. But in a society, we can't treat everyone equally within everything.
Definitely.
Sure, in terms of jobs, in terms of, you know, things that can be fair.
Of course.
You know, like in a game of chess, women, men compete, whatever. In a game of, you know, even tennis, which, okay, tennis is still very physical.
Yes.
But still, the best man is going to be better than the best woman.
Of course.
Like maybe, yeah, of course, there's tons of women that are better than tons of men. But the best of the best in terms of anything physical, athletics. I mean, now imagine the All Blacks all 15 of them had to decide that they're now women and they're going to go compete against the other women that are playing rugby.
Of course.
It just can't work.
It would be an annihilation, to be honest. They would. They'd just the hits alone. I don't think any of those women would recover from it. And
so I think that's the only thing is maybe having a separate category for people that, but also then there's levels as well of
how, controlling
so
the fairness is a difficulty.
Because, you know, has that man gone through hormone replacement therapy to become a female, or hormone reduction therapy or whatever it would be? Has he not? And it's just so tough. I think,
you know, the specifications of that would then have to be, you know, remarked for that sort of category. I mean, we also, as a raw lifter, for example, or as an equipped lifter, we've got certain specifications. So if that's a category you need to bring in, then work on the specifications. If it has to change, then, you know, you can always change rules. Sports change rules constantly. So then, you know, you work it out in terms of when you allow it in, you do it almost as a guinea pig trial, if I can phrase it like that, and you see what you need to work on, what we need to change, what rules we need to implement in order to better suit this sort of category. But I definitely don't think it's something that should be implemented altogether, because then, again, how are you going to control that fairness?
Yeah.
Are you going to measure their estrogen and their testosterone before they start competing with the female division?
It's going to be very expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can't exactly do that kind of testing for every competition or for every sort of thing. Like, I mean, there's so many comps that you'd have to do before you can get to a world championship level. Has that now been implemented throughout all of those kind of competitions before they get there? And how are you going to control that now? And it's even if their estrogen is now at the same level and their test is back down, they've had years and years of muscle density that they built up using testosterone that a woman would take another 10, 15 years to try and build up to. So it's, once again, how is that fair, rather than maybe making a separate subcategory and fitting in those people and working out those specifications? Because at least then they're still also sort of competing with each other, if I can phrase it like that. But then I think that also kind of defeats their point of wanting to compete against the women's division, if I can phrase it that way.
Yeah, but it can't work in terms of the fairness of the sport.
No, definitely
Can't.
not.
Stem cell research. Why stem cells in particular, and like regenerative therapy and all that?
So to be very honest, it's a very growing field of study. Just what I saw people doing in the world with stem cells already. So from my undergrad, I was already, checking them regenerate kidneys and livers and things like that. Obviously not fully functional as yet, but knowing that you can kind of do that sort of thing and assist with people and their diseases, I fell in love with the concept. There's always a joke with biomedical technologists and biomedical scientists, and it's always like, we chose this so that we wouldn't have to work with people directly. And it's, you still want to make a difference and you still want to help people. But I definitely feel like I am better suited for a lab. So I love being a lab rat. I love hiding in the lab, doing my part, and knowing that one day maybe this can help people.
So your part, what is your part? Like, are you researching things? Are you physically testing things? Like, on an average day, because obviously it could change.
So on an average day, I do spend a lot of time researching, but at the same time, I do perform my own experiments and things like that. And the data that I get from there is what I publish in journals and what I'll be using as to qualify for my PhD now. So I'm pretty much in the lab every day, running experiments, getting data, then it's the other half of the day where you're running now doing data analysis and all those fun things.
What's the most exciting experiment, research topic, or the thing that you've done that, you know, people be like, okay, that's pretty cool? Well, for you at least,
For me.
what you thought was fun.
So I love my masters because I actually got to prove my hypothesis. So what I wanted to prove was that the two wavelengths together would better differentiate the adipose-derived stem cells into osteogenic cells. And I actually did that. So the two wavelengths with the proliferation or the abundancy sort of aspect and the differentiation aspect from the other laser did seem to better enhance the differentiation as well as then help those differentiated cells proliferate. So it was very cool to obviously prove my hypothesis that I wanted to for my master's. There's nothing worse for a researcher than, you know, going, this failed, we were wrong. So when you prove that you're right and you got it correct and you've done the analysis to show for it, it's very rewarding. And then obviously then trying to publish that data into a scientific journal and them accepting it, it's just
That's awesome.
the biggest reward.
Yeah. On the surface level, where are we today in terms of stem cell application, in terms of helping people with maybe knee injuries, arthritis? Like, where are we in terms of, like, we're not going to now be able to grow another limb.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to, you know, regenerate teeth the way sharks can. So, like, where are we?
So right now, stem cell research is a little bit limited in terms of for public use, if I can phrase it that way. It is a very expensive form of treatment. In terms of, I know for like tendon injuries and things like that, it is seen more now as a popular option as a treatment, depending on how severe the case is, obviously. Doctors don't firsthand recommend it just because of the cost or depending on the kind of patient, whether they can afford it. And I think that is one factor that us as researchers are actually working on the best. We try to develop a protocol or develop a treatment that is the most cost effective and that can then be put into applications for people. So it is something that we've become more conscious as researchers. I feel that we are very aware that we want this to be a public use. So we need to already from the initiation of how we do this research, make it a cost-effective form of treatment. So it is developing that way and it is getting that way. And I truly believe that one day, you know, stem cells will be used as a first form of treatment for a lot of other patients, regardless of disease. I've seen stem cell applications for hearts. I've seen for neurodegenerative disease, my osteogenic degeneration type diseases. All those sort of factors, stem cells have the ability to assist with it. And the fact that we just now need to make it more consumable friendly, if I can phrase it that way, for the consumer or for the patient themselves, that becomes now our task. And I feel like we are getting there and we're slowly trying to implement that.
The stem cell now, like, let's say you get injected with stem cells, are we only at a point where it kind of alerts the other cells to regenerate? Or are we looking past that where, you know, because like the heart can't regenerate, or those stem cells that were in the heart stay those stem cells for the remainder of your life? You know, the other organs, I assume, that can regenerate.
So
slightly.
Even the brain, for example, when those certain cells die, then they die. So they don't have the ability to now regenerate as well. So when you inject stem cells into a patient or into a site of injury, for example, you're helping those cells that are there to actually proliferate and then abundantly then produce what they need to or go into the certain tissue that they need to be in. So it's more a matter of you won't really be kickstarting the tissue that is already there if you're just adding to it and helping those cells now sort of do what they need to do and function.
I guess it's kind of like with like a PRP where you, like the vampire facial, let's say, you know, where it's basically just getting that collagen to, you know, start working again and tighten the skin and do its function.
Yes, exactly. So it's almost just like helping them remember, if I can phrase it that way. So you're helping that tissue be like, okay, here's these cells, this is what they're supposed to be doing, kind of thing. A lot of the time when cells are dying off or things like that, it's because they're no longer performing their optimal function. And now when you put in cells that are newer or fresher, they're now able to perform at the function that they're supposed to. Another benefit of stem cell therapy that I find impressive compared to others is that there's a limiting range of like allogenic reactions or the body rejecting it, which is a huge problem with when you do transplants, for example, the body has a tendency, if I'm not mistaken, it's like about 63 or 64% of rejecting that organ. So to sit there and go through that kind of procedure, which is still very expensive, and to have the body rejected anyway is also a downfall from that kind of point of research.
Whereas and the person just dies, or what happens?
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not as severe, but majority of cases it can be. So to now use stem cell therapy where it overcomes that sort of challenge, I feel like is incredibly beneficial. So to grow that kind of research and get the parameters right, it could be huge in terms of how much it actually helps.
Can the science ever get to a point? Well, I don't know. I guess our bodies are always going to be the same, but the application of these stem cells, could we ever get to a point where, things can regenerate?
I don't think our cells, like naturally as we stand, would be able to do that, but maybe introducing enhancing factors that could assist with that. But then again, it's a matter of what are you putting in your body and how do we control the effects of it? And that's where research comes in again. And it is a very lengthy process in terms of doing medical research. It goes through a series of steps before it even gets accepted as a clinical trial. And even then in clinical trials is another 10, 15 years from there. So it is a very lengthy process. And I understand where it comes from in the sense of you could be implicated for killing someone if you put the wrong thing in them. And I get where they come from. But also I feel like as researchers, we need to find quicker ways in terms of getting from each step to the next step in order to, if this is effective, shouldn't it be helping people already? So we are a little bit slow in our process, but I see already with stem cells, we are starting to find ways to sort of overcome those gaps and hopefully get this as a speedy, more cost-effective sort of treatment.
Well, I mean, if you look at, obviously it's sci-fi, but if you look at Spider-Man and Killer Croc, no, not Killer Croc, what's the lizard? It's the lizard guy, whoever's the lizard guy. He lost his arm somehow and he's working with stem cells and regenerative therapy, and then his arm starts to grow back, but then he turns into the lizard guy. So that hopefully that we don't get to that point
Exactly.
where things go bad because we start playing around with like salamander cells and stuff.
No, look, clinic in vivo trial testing right now is very stringent. So there's a lot of rules and a lot of ethics around it. So I think what animals and things you can play with is very contained at this point.
I mean, it's like probably just rats.
Yeah, well, rats, zebrafish, even rabbits.
So what regenerative like a zebrafish? Is there something special about it that it like can regenerate something in particular?
So to be very honest, I'm not too familiar with exactly what they're doing with them. I know it's more cancer stem cell research based, that they're using them for something called nano PDT or nano photodynamic therapy for cancer stem cell research. So what specifically is there in the zebrafish that can take sort of the testing? I'm not too familiar with. Unfortunately, I don't work with in vivo applications. I wish I did, but unfortunately not my field of expertise. But I can definitely maybe find out.
Yeah. Are there any animals that you through all of this have heard stories about, like this animal has amazing, the shark's teeth, they can regenerate as many teeth as they need to for their whole life. What animals, do you know any particular?
To be honest, I stay away from animal testing just because it's
something. Not testing.
Just in testing in general.
But like you've heard, I today heard about the sharks.
So that's fascinated you.
Yeah.
To be honest, not really. I know of like horses use to create anti-venom for when snake bites and things like that. It's the fact that their body is capable of producing those sort of antibodies where we're incapable of it. It's actually quite incredible. So very grateful for horses at that point.
Yeah.
But none others that I can really.
I think that's people think we're apex predators, we're the best. But I mean, what can we actually do? You get a cut. Maybe you'll get a scab and that's it.
Yeah,
but if you look,
yeah,
exactly. But I mean, if you lose a tooth, you've lost a tooth. If you, cut your finger off, your finger's gone. And you're probably going to bleed out and die. Whereas if a lion's finger gets cut off, it's probably going to survive.
Most likely.
But we're so weak because I think we've just been so sheltered and our immune systems are so bad and, we've just had it easy. But animals are way more interesting than us.
Oh, no, definitely. I agree 100%. Humans are very fragile. And I think we come with a, how do I phrase it, like God complex.
Yeah.
And it's because we've got the brain functionality to survive the way that we do, but definitely doesn't take away our fragility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hence why we come up with these sort of treatments.
Yeah. And we have
try
to.
and so on. No,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, in closing, what animal could you be? Just because we're talking about animals. What's your favorite animal, or your favorite animal might be different to what animal you would like to be, and why?
So my favorite animal is a black panther.
Okay.
I just love how majestic it is. It's just so strong and fierce. And I know it's one of the sort of lonely animals. You always see a black panther by itself and that kind of thing. But I love its ability to hunt and take care of itself. And I don't know, its fierceness. It's just something I've always just loved about it.
Okay, awesome.
And you?
Me, yes, I don't really have. I would say maybe like a wolf, like a wild wolf, not like a husky or like a humanized.
These tame.
Yeah. I think a wolf, just because they're so clever, but also like a grizzly bear, because they're just so strong. Like the sheer strength. I was watching a documentary on Apple TV, Big something. It's all about the big animals.
Oh yeah.
So there was episodes on like this massive octopus, which was huge. It was ridiculous. Actually, if anyone wants to watch it, you must check it out.
I'm definitely gonna go check it out.
So like there were certain ones in Africa where they talk about obviously like giraffe, elephant, all of those big ones here. But there was one it was in Canada where they were talking about bison, and they were looking at the grizzlies there.
Oh, wow.
And just that the sheer strength and the ability to destroy anything is just amazing.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And we think we're so strong as humans.
No, we're not. Even as powerlifters.
No. I'd rather be a grizzly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Dani. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, JC, for having me. This
Of
has
course.
been so wonderful.
Good.
Thank you.
I'm glad. And thanks, guys, for watching.